All right, today we're talking about space planning and making things functional, and then also making them fashionable.
Fashionable.
So Lincoln, when you're designing a layout, what are some things that you like to do?
Yeah, design-wise, it's the most important thing that we emphasize with Kingdom & Co. is functionality is number one priority, and then number two is beauty. Because there's nothing worse than having a really beautiful home with a terrible layout.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that's important to understand is, and what keeps us in business, to be honest with you, is there's so many builders that had such terrible layouts.
Yep.
Throughout the 90s, 2000s, 80s, multi-level change. I mean, everything's just boxed together and nothing flows well. So because of that, it keeps us in business, and we're able to basically look at it from a level. It's almost like a science. It's crazy to watch our designers do this, but you see it from the top view, and they're able to get so creative and make things so functional based off of priorities and based off the way people live and their lifestyles. And what, if your kids are out of the house and you want to have a home prepared for grandkids, or if you're a new family, a new couple, and you want to, it just depends on the situation. But like to be able to specifically design a space according to the current situation and the future takes a lot of scientific calculations.
Yeah, just some forethought, right? So obviously the big trend that we've seen over the last couple of decades is the open floor plan.
Yeah.
Right? And what I've seen more and more often happening now is also the butler pantry thing.
Very important, yeah.
Like, I'm not a huge fan of it, but a lot of people love it.
I love it, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe talk about how, when you do the open floor plan, how that kind of led to the butler pantry and why the butler pantry became more popular.
Yeah, lots of times they'll take the space, right? You'll blow out all the walls and open it all up. And then from there, lots of times they'll take the kitchen and they'll move it more forward, and then typically behind the kitchen now is where a butler pantry is. And most people like to have a walk-in pantry that has a lot of space for organization, and so that way their actual kitchen isn't full of stuff.
Yeah.
It gets really cluttered pretty quick if you don't have.
So the intent behind it is it helps you keep the kitchen cleaner and more presentable?
Yeah, and then it also allows you to have more open shelving in the butler's pantry to where you can see if you're low on chips, or you can see if rice is getting lower. It helps you keep your inventory.
It's not tucked behind the top room.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But yeah, so we noticed that's open concept is very powerful. It still is. It's not, we're not getting crazy open anymore, but there's still the open concept of being able to cook and entertain and still have people out and about, and having that, when you're having a party or something, you can have 15, 20 people in a comfortable area, so that's very popular. Another important layout is adding a casita.
Yeah.
That's been huge, or adding a loft above.
Yeah, there's a ton of two-story homes, that were built 80s, 90s, early 2000s, where that first room you walk into, it's completely useless, and it's floor to ceiling, right? And so getting more utility out of it by converting that loft area is pretty helpful for people.
Yeah, especially in areas where the price per square foot is expensive. Like a lot of our clients in Summerlin,
yeah.
When you have a loft that's 1,000 square feet and you can do it for the price that we can do it at, a lot of times it's a $100,000 investment. And they can add $100,000 of equity in their home just by adding a loft.
Yeah, they pick
powerful.
up that square footage, and now their home's worth $100K more.
Yeah,
So that's an easy one. Okay, have you seen anybody that's gotten tired of the open floor plan and wants things more compartmentalized? Is that a thing?
I mean, I've seen a lot of designers pushing that more lately, but I haven't seen it too much because, again, most people don't like to feel cramped into one space. But I think you'll have a hybrid of that eventually in the future, is my guess.
Yeah. On the bigger homes, people they do a game room, right? And for me, in my house, I only want one main collective area.
That's fair, yeah.
But if you've got the space, a lot of people are doing dedicated game rooms and movie theaters and stuff like that. But that comes, that's a different tiered product for sure.
Yeah, for sure. If I'm a client, Zion, what should I expect if you are knocking down walls and you are opening things up and you are adding big slider glass doors and things like that? Like, how do I budget for that?
It can get expensive, yeah, because as you increase the spans, you increase the need for engineering and supporting those loads. And it's not just the load above. A lot of times it's putting in new footings, particularly when you do these large spanning sliders or accordion doors. it's not just about putting in those big headers, it's about where that load is going to transfer, and then you got to do these footings. The footings is probably a more expensive part than what's overhead.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that's doable, and we do it all the time. It's literally what we do day in and day out. Yes. And I don't want to discourage people to think that's too expensive, but it does add up.
Yeah, it does. And you got to look at it this way. You know, likely the group that built your home was a production builder, and they're trying to build it as economically as possible. And so doing larger spans isn't really in their economic plan. Yeah. Okay, and so a lot of what we do is, now that this home's worth more, it makes sense to put that additional investment in there to make it more usable, to make it more functional. And that's where it comes at a cost.
For sure, yeah. And it's one of those things where I used to always think was, because before I got into this business, that it was just like unattainable. And, and now the more I'm in it, I'm like, oh, it's not that hard. It just can cost more money. You know, and we know with our clients, sometimes it's 10 to 15 to 20% more if they are going to do those things.
Yeah, if you're doing a reconfiguration, it is a lot more money.
If you're taking the kitchen and moving it to the other side of the house, or if you're
that's even out.
Yeah, if you're knocking down walls, or if you're adding a big slider door, you got to things like that. But it also changes your home into something incredible.
It can, yeah. And you got to look at how it impacts your mechanical systems, your air conditioning and heating. As you start moving stuff around, a lot of those bulky areas that you don't like in your home, usually there's something above that.
Yeah, that's true.
There's a pipe. There's a what's the thing called? There's a duct.
A duck.
Not a quack quack duck, an air duct.
There's a duck. Yeah. There's nothing worse than finding ducks inside the ceiling.
You wouldn't believe what we find out there.
But no, so I mean, is there any stories that come to mind on a customer's experience when they are changing the floor plan, when they're changing up or even your own personal experience? Is there anything that comes to mind that you wish you would have known before, or going into a project like this, what you wish you could understand?
Okay, I think one of the biggest transformations we see are for layouts that have a galley kitchen. A galley kitchen is almost like a hallway. And particularly in homes that were like 60s, 70s, and 80s, they had galley kitchens. And maybe they just did it to like get rid of the wife and like tuck her away in a corner, and they didn't have to integrate with her.
Maybe so.
But
terrible.
Anyway, they might come back. Anyway, those have the biggest transformation because obviously once, and they do take some engineering, but they totally transform the space. We had one project, I think it's called the Parker, on our website. And not only are you blowing it out towards the living area, but you're also blowing it out towards the backyard with a nice accordion window or an accordion door. Those ones have the most amazing transformation because they go from just being something that nobody wants to live in to being something that everybody would love.
Yeah, it's amazing. With the Parker, I remember going out there and just seeing this wall cutting off the kitchen and the living area, and then basically you have the whole golf course on the side. And so when we blew out that wall and opened up the kitchen, it was like, oh my gosh, the golf course opened up, the kitchen opened up, everything just seemed to flow better. It was just like, whoa, like just knocking down one wall can make such a difference.
Yep.
And it's just so powerful. So,
and that's what we do. So as good designers and builders, we look at, okay, what's going to have the most dramatic change to that space.
And space planning can get very creative. Like there's certain things where you're like, okay, there's plumbing here, so let's do our best to keep our plumbing stuff in this area to save costs. It's really important to have a team that understands cost savings when you're doing these dramatic changes, or else you will overspend and be over budget.
Yeah, we call it value engineering, right? When we're value engineering a project, I want to limit the amount of intrusions into the slab, particularly.
Yes.
So when it drains, it's not so much the water supply, where you're getting the water from, but it's where you're going to put the water after. So
absolutely,
digging into that foundation gets expensive and it's labor intensive, and then just dealing with concrete. And then if you're dealing with a home that has a post-tension slab, you have to x-ray it. And so that even gets more complicated. So those are things you want to avoid.
For sure. And yeah, like I said, our team is really good at that.
Yeah.
So we're the best at it.
Also, one of the things that's important with a good design build process is obviously thinking 2, 3, 4, 10 steps ahead. And so recently we're doing a job where we're just installing the windows. We sold a nice window and door package. It's a new home build. And there was just a lot of having to think, okay, once we put this window in, who's coming behind us and how are they going to finish their product to our product. And that matters to the customer particularly in the ultimate finish of their project. Okay, so in particular with how windows finished a stucco in this instance, we had to think about that, right? And okay, you're going to finish with this thickness of stucco. There's foam involved. How is this door going to swing? What's going to happen when it opens and closes? And how is it all going to tie together? A lot of times when we're working with outside designers, we're going to come in there and we're going to have that foresight to make sure that customer gets the best finish possible. And there was a lot of readjusting that we did to make sure that happened.
Yeah, a lot of times if you don't have design that understands how to do design build, what really happens to these projects is every single trade has 3 or 4 or 5 of those little tricks that they don't understand until it hits.
Yeah.
And so to be able to understand those things and to be able to project those things and have a plan for those things, it makes the process and the product smooth and seamless. And so it's so important to have, we can't emphasize enough, design is so important.
Yeah.
It's so important.
And you really want to take as many decisions out of the field as possible. You want them to be following instructions and be prepping, because otherwise you're always going to get that guy who comes in behind and he's just going to do whatever's easiest.
Yes.
And that may cause a lot of complications later.
Yeah.
You know?
It's kind of like a Jenga board, like our Jenga puzzle thing. Like when you pull out one thing, the whole thing can fall if it's done wrong.
Yeah.
Because you're like, wait a minute, the glass is put in wrong, and then you have 4 or 5 trades after that.
Yeah.
And then you have to fix it, and they have to call back the painter. You have to call back the drywall guy. You have to call back the stucco guy. And then you have to call back the electrician. And then you have to call back the framer. And you're like, we have to try scheduling 6 trades to come in one day.
And nobody wants to take responsibility for it.
And nobody wants to take responsibility for it, and they're all too busy.
Yeah.
Put that formula together and times that by 50, 60, 300, 400 decisions.
Yeah.
And my goodness, it could be a train wreck. So design build is the key, for sure.